So like before, my name is Ed Ritter. I work at Clifton Larson Allen. I'm an auditor. I do about 15 of these schools, and I've been assigned to the fiscal guide. So this is the second report that hits in the fall. And also I'd like to take one quick moment and thank Ashley, who's been helping out all day, and Lori for setting all this up. Okay, so it's kind of a big deal, and we wouldn't have any of this without them. So it's kind of a big deal. What's that? Oh, okay. So I don't have.
Try it one more time.
Thank you. All right. So a couple basic things about this report. This is a little different than the other one in the fact it only happens once a year. Your enrollment's going to happen in those 2 days, the one in January and the one in September. This is only a fall report. And this report is completely compliance-based. Are you meeting requirements? Are you not? Due December 15th with the enrollment guide that's done that we learned about all this morning. Now, I'm a big picture guy, so why even have this report? It's because they want to make sure, are you solvent? Are you financially capable of running a school? Are you meeting your bills? Are you paying your people? Can I give you money as the DPI and make sure you're going to educate kids? That's the point of this report. In addition, are you doing it properly? There are tons of rules. This is the government, so lots of rules, lots of regulations, and a lot of this is checking on that to make sure that you're meeting all those requirements. Those two pieces, if you keep that in mind, the whole report makes sense to you. If you try to otherwise think about this report, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's awful. Congratulations, Ed, you get this one. Okay, now, auditor. We talked a little bit earlier about things that you should expect, and I kind of broke it out a little bit more on this slide. Don't forget, this is me. This is Jason, this is what we do. And the first thing I would expect is 2 to 3 days in the fall for this. Okay, because you're going to be doing enrollment procedures and fiscal procedures. So all those checking of those applications that we learned about with Lori this morning, and all the stuff you're going to see, and don't worry, there's plenty. It's all going to be in this report. Next thing up, we talked about before when I said PBC list, and we already discovered, what does that mean? Provided by client, okay? This is kind of what one would look like. It's going to be line by line what you're supposed to be providing to the auditor. You can't read this, I know. It's designed just to give you an idea of what it would look like. It'll probably be an Excel format. It'll typically have a date completed for you to kind of check off. Don't try to use this as your PBC list, okay? It's an example. All right, but this is something that I would expect from your auditor by mid-October to late October. When he gets that report, or he or she should be kicking you this. That way you have plenty of time before they arrive sometime in that late October, early November period, and things can all kind of go smoothly. You're not racing at the last minute. Last thing up, from that material that you get, from those pieces of all those lines, the auditor is going to come back with samples. This is not DPI samples. This is samples that they've come up with based on DPI numbers that they're going to kick you to know what you have to pull when they're out there. You're probably like, what the heck's a sample then? Well, let's look at this. This is all your invoices. And by the way, they're going to ask for them from December 1st of the previous year, all the way through July 1st. That's straight out of the guide. And from that, depending on how you pay, we're going to pick 5 or 25, unless there's problems. So all these piles of invoices, we're just going to pick 5 to 25. And don't worry, it's all in the slides. The slides are designed to give you this kind of support. If this is not an all-encompassing slide deck, but it's also kind of to guide you so you don't have to write everything down, because then it's hard to pay attention to me. And I like attention. So, you see this? Risk. If you don't know, this is all what auditing is about. Okay, it's all about risk. How risky are you? Ashley, can you flip to my Word file? So I'm showing you, she's pulling up right on the computer right now. This is straight from DPI. We get this from them. We will bring it to your site and we'll analyze how risky you are. as soon as she gets it.
Yeah, sorry.
Is it up there?
Oh. Give me 1 second.
Here we go. There it is. Okay, now once again, you can't read this, so I'm going to pull out some points on it. And it's not designed for you to read. You can actually go out there and look at it yourself on the DPI website if you really want to. But I'm going to highlight a couple moments on this. So this is what DPI says you're low risk if you're over here. Middle risk, high risk. And there's a couple key characteristics of this report that I'm going to point to. It's how you're doing financially. Remember, can you pay your bills? If you can't pay your bills, you're high risk. So, how is your financial position? Are your assets greater than your liabilities? If they are, you're lower risk. And as we move over here, this is going to talk about the bad letter that you might get from Jason, because you'd never get it from me, which is, I'm just kidding, just kidding, which is a going concern. Basically, in the next 12 to 18 months, I don't think you're going to exist. If you're over here, you're high risk, which means your liabilities are probably greater than your assets, meaning your net income, usually your change in net assets for a nonprofit, is negative. Based on this analysis, and there's tons of little pieces in here, this is how we decide if you're risky or not. Straight from DPI, if you'd like to go look in your nightly reading, go ahead, it's really fun. You can be one of us. But I just wanted to give you an example of what we're doing, because you might not see this, you might not know what we're really doing behind it, and this affects some of your sampling.
That's funny.
That is pretty neat. Up. Right there. Perfect. Great job, Ashley. Okay, so one of the things that's affected by your sampling is your payroll testing. Based on how you score in that risk category, we can either be doing a little bit of payroll testing, which is where we'll look at only 10% of your current year employees. But if you're on the naughty list on that bad side, that's when we basically look at possibly all of your payroll in the current year and prior year, 25%. This is how some of those things that you're doing financially affect the report and affect what we're doing. It's not because Jason or me dislike you. It's because we're following this guide to a T because that's what the guide tells us. This is not a discrepancy thing. This is not a, I'm a nice auditor and he's the mean auditor. We literally follow the report. That's the way it's designed. Yes, sir.
The testing basically, and I'm going to be rhetorical about this, my statement, is did you issue an accurate paycheck, and was the paycheck able to be cleared by the employee?
It's bigger than that.
Continue to expand.
And we're going to go into that. Can I hold that question?
Sure, you can.
Because I have that in here.
Good.
So just hold that thought. We're coming back to it. Okay?
Thank you.
Now, and remember, everybody remember that. I promised to help him on that one. It's coming. So look at this. This is all 12 steps of the guide. There's actually a 13th, but they're eliminated, so I eliminated it. But here's the 12 steps. Isn't it great? Doesn't it look fun? Just, each one of those steps has different requirement, different testing, different things to look at, different things we're going to do to you. Anyone going like this yet? Because I think that way when I look at that. I go, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Okay. So we're going to take the next basically 30 minutes here, and I'm going to walk you through some of these pieces. It's not an all-encompassing list. It's the highlight reel. And it's going to point to you what we're really doing in each section and why we're doing it. Okay. That allows you on the other side to first off understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and also to prepare. I don't know how we went backwards, but that's okay. So the first section of this report, it's a get to know you. Get to know how your accounting system works. Are you using a new system? Are you using it by paper? Are you using a dual entry system? How does it work? Secondly, revenues. Right here. DPI requires you to keep your choice money separate. They don't want mingling. And the reason why is that way they know how you're using it. So we're going to make sure that that is the case. And third, there is going to be something at the end of your year, 6/30, that we're going to look at how you spent the money. And based on how you spent that money allows them to say, you're good with that money, or possibly you might owe it back. Or you better have a good plan of how you're going to use it. Because they want to know the expenses are being used for the kids in your school. This is not to fund your school, it's to fund the education of the choice kids. And that's how we're gonna look into these. And some of them are allocatable, some are not. Some, and when I say allocate, some we can put some towards the choice and some versus non-choice. This is a key component. And like I said, at 6:30, when they do the regular audit, that's when they're going to get into this reserve schedule, and it's going to talk about all this, and we don't want to get into that today. Unless you want to, Jason.
I'm good.
All right. Last thing up on this, and this is part of the get to know you, it's called a system walkthrough. If you've had an audit, you've done these. Usually they're done at a preliminary time, which is earlier than the audit. And in this case, it's requiring certain walkthroughs. And a walkthrough is a get to know how your system works, how your controls work in certain areas. Okay? The two key areas is going to be cash receiving, how you're collecting the money, and how you're expending, how you're paying bills. We're going to walk through those pieces. And it might be similar, but maybe not, to this little video. And I pre-apologize, there's one bad word in the video, I'm sorry.
I was expecting. What?
So then you must physically bring them to the software people.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, sometimes. What would you say you do here? Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
I hope it's not like that. But anyway, it's just the idea that basically we're going to ask you about how your stuff works, and we're going to ask for some support document behind that. That is an obviously dramatized approach. Hopefully it's not like that. If it is, give my firm or Jason's firm a call. Because the reality is we want it to be smooth. We're beeping. All right. So back to here. The second piece of this whole guide, and by the way, the first 5 or 6 steps is all accounting related. You're going to notice that. Heavy accounting. All that stuff that we just talked about, heavy. So in this component, which is the control systems, you're going to have a couple things designed if you're first year. You're going to have an electronic fund transfer policy. How are you paying ACHs? How are you paying wires? What is that standard? If I'm sending it, is Jason reviewing it? Okay, that would be a control check. And is that something, what documentation do we need? Can I send it by email? By the way, I would not have that in our policy. If you haven't heard, a lot of email fraud going out there where they send you an email, send me money, and it's now in some foreign country we can get back. Okay, secondly, eligible expenses. That's another policy you're going to need to develop at your school, get a board approved. And these are things we're going to check against what we look at. Are you doing what you say you're doing? Okay. Bank recs. You guys probably do them, huh? Every month. We're going to look at 2 of them. Are they right? What kind of controls do you have around them? Lastly, and this goes back to, remember, two things to report about. Number one is, are you financially secure? So are you making any non-sufficient fund payments? This is a cardinal sign that you are not financially making it. If you're sending out checks and they're bouncing, the guide doesn't like that, and neither does the DPI. Okay? That's your second piece of the guide. Welcome to the favorite thing of everyone's life, budgets. So we all restricted to budgets. I live by a budget every day of my job, every month. You all have budgets. You have wish your budgets are probably huge, and they're not. I get all that. But your budgets have to be approved by the board, and they have to be submitted, and then we're going to look at them. These are the characteristics that are required by your budget. They need to break it out in some of these ways. So full-time enrollment, basically estimated revenues and costs. These are pieces that are in your budget. I'm not going to go through all these. But the guide is going to have us look at them to make sure your budgets are what the DPI wants. And these budgets have a due date. They're due June 30th. That's your original budget. But you have a chance to change. And this isn't a chance, actually, it's a required change. If your attendance numbers change, for example, all of a sudden I have an inflow of 30, 40 students. I have an inflow of all new choice members. They want an updated budget because they want to know where you're spending the money, how you're spending it, how you're balancing your books. And that is required 20 more students or 20% of your population change. And that has to be done by November 1st of that year. It's a required change by the guide and the DPI. Oh, I love budgets. Yes, sir, go ahead. By the way, we're really close to your answer.
What's the question?
The question is, for payroll testing, what do you all
I
need?
just want to make sure you remember.
Oh, I got you.
No, we are new so that our budget has been submitted May 1st. We're not involved in this unless what we submitted follows the 20 student change or.
Absolutely.
Well, we're not.
So if you're saying 100 kids and all of a sudden you're at 120,
No.
you need a revised budget.
We're not in that.
Or 20%, which would
I
be,
understand that.
so that's
We're
it.
not in that either.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I try to eliminate what I don't need to worry about.
Yeah.
Ashley, what's going on here?
Actually, so that's based on the September count date.
Well,
So you
that
don't
should
know
be
it, yeah,
consistent. I
you
mean, we
don't know
know
it
that-
until
but it-
then,
yeah,
until that
within
date,
September.
you don't know if you have to revise it.
Gotcha,
or not.
gotcha.
Okay.
That's a good point.
So back onto our payments. Okay. Payment testing. And this is going to get into some of this accounting, looking at stuff, you pulling files, you pulling support. And by the way, this goes back to you better keep good documentation. If you're going to be part of this program, save all your receipts, save all your support because it's going to be required. So some of the testing, Ashley, I don't have a clicker. Thank you. You're gonna,
Their screen went blank.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to fix.
oh, should I
Yeah.
stop?
No, it's okay. You can keep going.
Are you sure? I can tell a story.
Like,
Every teacher.
Yeah, I used to tell lots of stories to my students. Anybody guess what I used to teach?
History.
math.
Who said history? Well done. And
Social stuff.
economics.
Budgets.
And you know how many accounting courses I had before I became an accountant? 0. I used to say to everybody, God, I don't want to take one of those. They're awful. Then I went back and got a master's in it.
Why?
Why? I wanted to try something new. My sister's a CPA, and she's like, you know, if you get that, you can always do whatever. And I thought, well, who knows, maybe I want to teach at a college. And so I went that path, and then I loved my professors, and they're like, you should really go to a firm. And so I jumped to CLA. So this is a second career. I do miss the original one for sure, though, because I was a coach. I love the impact. I like being in front of people.
No kidding.
So all those things. It was always fun too, because and maybe Jason has a different experience, but I love the creativity of it, you know, coming up with what I can think of. It's hard to be creative with a fiscal guide.
Time's up.
Are we all good?
We're getting there.
Okay.
Well done. Nice job. Thanks again, Ashley, for all you're doing. I know you're doing your best. You're doing great. So vendor payments, reimbursements, and we're gonna get into this a little bit more. These are some of the things we're gonna be looking at and giving you those samples on. Now, perfect. We're also gonna look if you rent your building, and we're gonna need 2 months of that to prove that you're making the payments on time. This goes back to, are you financially okay? Lastly, we're gonna test payroll, which we've talked about earlier, because payroll is what's your biggest expense at a school?
Teacher's salaries.
Teacher salaries, payroll. So that means, guess what's always crimping your budget? Payroll. What's the first thing that gets hurt when you can't pay anything? You probably hold back some money and say, we'll pay you next time, we'll catch you up. If that's happening, we're looking for it. Yes, sir.
Will that include not only the payments to the employees, but also withholding taxes? And those payments?
Those all should be, yep,
Social Security or, well.
yep, all should be paid on a timely basis.
Insurance benefit payments that are withheld.
We're gonna look beyond that. You're gonna see it later. We're even gonna look when you pay your insurance for your bus
Well, you know, the bus.
or a van. Because if you're not paying that on time, that's also a problem.
Okay,
We're looking for anything you might not be paying because you can't afford it. All right, so this is our step one in looking at how this is tested. So the key in the guide is they're giving you 90 days to pay. And if you fall outside this 90-day window, that's a problem. And that's where we're gonna check the box that you're not hitting your bills on time. So you have 90 days from the date of receipt of that invoice, which we're gonna ask for, because we wanna see when you got it. And we're gonna wanna know when you paid it. Because the only way to see if this is 90 days is to get both pieces. Yes, sir.
the date of receipt isn't necessarily consistent with the date on the invoice.
Correct. And that's where I would suggest you timestamp them when they get to the door. It's a great security thing for 2 reasons. One, it proves that someone's not like Joe here isn't just sitting on a bill.
Got it.
So it's a good control for your school anyway.
Okay.
But I would suggest timestamping them. We have our schools timestamp them when they arrive. And also, just as an extra control for you, and just something I would suggest as an auditor, I would suggest whoever's opening the mail and getting this invoice is different than the person paying. Because if Jason's getting all the bills, maybe I only see 5 of them when we pay them. If he has some reason to cover it up. I'm always using you as my bad person. I'm sorry. He seems like a really good guy too. I just met him. But I would strongly suggest that's a nice control of having 2 different people. One person open the mail, the next person process. And when they open the mail, timestamp, give it to the next person in line. Okay? But this is part of the testing we're gonna be doing. Here we go. This is your question. Almost forgot it too.
No, you.
Hold on.
All right, so payroll testing. A couple things are gonna be required. We're gonna wanna get your payroll dates. When you pay payroll, is it 2 weeks? Is it every month? Is it whatever your process is that you have designed, we wanna see that. That's step one. Secondly, we're gonna require payroll. And when we look at that, we're gonna see, is it being paid on the date you're supposed to be paying it on? Next, every single person in your building is that's involved in this program or any of that is supposed to have a signed contract saying, I'm Ed Ritter, I'm gonna make $30,000. Do you agree? I sign, you sign. This should be happening yearly.
Even the at-will employees
At-
that don't have
No
teacher
pay?
contracts.
Repeat the question, please, Ed.
Uh,
Repeat the question.
Okay, she asked at will employees, people who are,
Like an hourly employee.
an hour employee should have an approved
Maintenance.
pay rate for their hourly.
And they should sign.
Yep, and it should be a signed document. So if Jason is my principal, we both agree, I sign here, he signs there. Why?
To show that the school's gonna pay them.
And paying you properly. That way, when we get in there and we look at these 2 pieces, I can recalculate and see if you're right. Yes, sir.
Payroll and pay dates should we also be looking at the pay period that paycheck covers? Because they are different.
Yes, and that's
And
fine.
it could be a lag. In other
Right,
words,
and that's okay.
That's-
Well, because it'll show usually on your report, this is for the period of whatever, and then we tie those
but
together.
that's what you're gonna be looking at.
Yep.
Too, besides just the pay date,
Yes, the payroll report should show the timing. Yep, what it's covering.
because that creates, at the end of the period, covers the liability going forward if you're not clearing it as of the end of your fiscal.
Completely agree.
Okay.
Yep. Now, when you're doing this, here's the big thing, and this is something that's missed in a lot of schools. It's missed at some of the ones that I go to. If Jason is a great worker, and I'm like, Jason, you're killing it, man. Come on into my office. I'm giving you a raise. You're going from $7 an hour to $7.50.
Thank you.
Spend it all in one spot.
We got tight budgets. That is dangerous, 2 reasons. Some of them will be verbal and be like, oh, okay, great, this is awesome. And he's not gonna complain because I'm getting $7.50 now. What did we fail to do?
Document writing.
Document, and we will come in there when you don't match, because we're gonna look at that first one he signed for $7 an hour and say, Jason, why is Jason now making 50 cents more an hour? What's going on here? Every time you change their pay, they need to be updated. Yes, sir.
What happens, this is for employees at will or full.
Yep.
What about outside contractors that are being compensated as a 1099 that are regular? They should also have some sort of a sign.
I would think you'd have a contract with them showing what the rates are.
Okay.
Otherwise, what is the vendor, how's that?
I
There should be some sort
understand,
of-
but that's.
Yeah,
okay.
I would say
The
you should have some
1099
sort of-
people, yeah.
Yep. All right, so we're moving out of accounting. I know it's exciting. Hold on. Now we're into the really good stuff, bureaucracy stuff, rules, everything that you could ever screw up. Here we go. Okay? First off, we're gonna ask you, are you compliant with all these places? If you don't know the acronyms, DUR is? Good. DWD? Nice. Your 990 is your return, as long as you're not a religious institution and you're exempt. IRS, you better know, Internal Revenue Service. If you don't know, they'll see you in about April something. DFI is
Financial institutions.
very good. Thank you, Lori, for participating. And anyway, there's a filing requirement. And then also, if you're doing grants, we're gonna check some of that. Now, remember, this is gonna get very now, rule. And you might at some point feel like it's too many rules. So take a look at this.
Oh,
Sir, did you fill out the eleven
I
seventy?
think I did.
Did you fill out the eleven
I
seventy?
filled this out.
That's the 1190. You're gonna have to go stand in the blue
Look, I was
line.
already in that line.
Sir, don't get snippy with me.
Well, I've been here all morning.
That's
I don't-
not my prerogative,
I
sir.
wait in one line, they send me to another
Well,
line,
you know
they
what?
send me
You
back.
can always call to
I
make an
try to
appointment.
call, I can't
You
get
can-
through, the line's always busy, it's
You can
ridiculous.
Go wait in the appointment line.
I don't want to
Sir,
wait, I've got
I
a job,
can't-
I don't
you're gonna
have
have
all day.
to-
I can't say this.
You're gonna have to take that
shouldn't be
somewhere
this
else. All
hard.
right, you know what? I'm on break.
So anyway, there's a lot of rules and it's not fun. So. That's Family Guy if you don't know.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fun. Carol, do we have any questions out there yet?
Oh, yeah, we do actually.
Okay, go ahead, Carol.
What about contracts that start July 1st? Are the auditors going to verify that wages have been paid out based on the start date of the contract?
Yeah. Yes, so if we do a sample and they're not in that particular group, they might not get picked first off. If we're doing 100%, they will get checked. And we are gonna look at their wage agreement if we pull them. So it depends on the month that gets pulled. But yes, they could be checked. Buses. The big yellow bus. Now, If you run your own bus, this is what it's dealing with. This is not if you're using a school district. You're exempt from this. But if you own a bus and you transport your athletic team by bus somewhere, then you have to follow some of these procedures. For example, you need an inspection. They want to make sure the vehicle's drivable, that the kids are safe in it. This has to be done every year. We're going to check on it and see how it goes. If you fail it, you better go get it passed. We've had some of them that we've seen and failed, and that's great. You gave me a failed inspection report. That then either needs to be eliminated from use, or you go and get it fixed. Insurance, like I talked about before, we're going to check and make sure it's properly insured. Okay, and drivers need to get background checks. Remember that word background check, because we're going to spend a lot of time on it in a few minutes. All right, but every driver needs to be able to drive and not be alone with kids and they have problems. Okay. This is some of the insurance requirements as of last year. This might change, I don't know. This is based on last year here. Some of the liability insurances you need depending on how many people you're transferring. Feel free to look up the new one when it comes out if there's been any changes. But these are there's guidelines for every single piece of this. Okay. There's more insurances that we're going to check too. Every single school is going to have different liability insurances that we're going to look at to make sure you're properly hitting all the standards of the guide and what the DPI wants. This is improper malpractice. There's one about general liability. There's an umbrella you need. These are all different insurance levels, and like I say, you can just follow and read whatever out there that exists. This is last year's numbers, but you need those in case something goes wrong. The DPI wants you covered. And this, by the way, we're going to make sure you're paid. So we're going to want to see that you're paid up on time with an invoice and proof of payment, which sometimes can be difficult because sometimes they only pay once a year. Okay. There are other vehicles you might own, and the guide goes into that too. So, for example, when I was in high school, I played on the golf team. And we used a big red Suburban we drive just to the course with, okay? That red Suburban was owned by the school. If you were in this program, we check on that. So whatever vehicles you're using. And in the guide, it tells you how many people you can have in that vehicle, depending on its size. Once again, you're going to need an inspection. You're going to need a background check on anyone who's driving. There's another piece to this. The guide wants to know if you're using it properly. Meaning, are you fitting in too many people? Example, I know it happens. It shouldn't happen, but it happens. Everybody, let's pile in the van. Oh, we don't need seatbelts. We'll just lap. We're the girls' golf team. We'll just go lap on each other to be fine. That is a problem. And sometimes what we've seen is poor documentation because you're required to have some support for this. This is an example that Lori provided me from her school. This goes into how many people can go into each ride. They sign off the purpose, things like that. This we're going to look at when we get out to your school. And what I've seen before is on some of them, they'll just start making their own down here. And you're like, well, hold on, the vehicle only held 6. How come I've got 8, 9, 10? Oh, Ed, that was a second trip. That looks terrible and not good. You don't want that to happen. New page, please. All right, ever had that?
Yeah.
All right, now you don't have to get this in detail with all this. It could be just this part. This was just a good example, so I wanted to show it to you.
Yeah, we just use it to track whoever's driving it can tell us about the mechanical issues too. And we use the odometer readings to make sure that we got the logs for every time the van was out.
Which is perfect.
It must have been an auditor at one point.
You want that? Sure, please.
All right. If you're contracting a bus service, once again, if it's not through a school district, you're covered. But if you're just doing a private service, we're gonna wanna know, are those vehicles inspected? And this is where it gets kind of difficult. What if we're moving in and out 15 different vans? You know, the van sometimes is this van, sometimes it's that van, sometimes it's that van. I would suggest getting as much support as you can. And making sure all those vehicles, and you can actually have them write a letter, that company saying, hey, I certify all vehicles have been inspected in the past year, to get you out of that. Proof of insurance, we're gonna ask, are those vehicles insured? Where's their certificate showing that they're properly insured?
Would you include this when you hire a bus for
I
like
would
a field
let them-
trip?
I would, yes, I would let them know, yes, that's part of transportating. Anytime you're transportating kids on a service like this, you need to be supporting. I would even be careful if it's, hey, jump in Steve's, my other teacher's car, because it gets kind of crazy. And not that we're gonna be all out there and me and Jason are gonna be sitting in the bushes watching and saying, oh my gosh, Joe took a kid in his car. But you just don't wanna go in those waters. And in addition, in today's world, with all the issues, I would suggest no one takes a kid in their car that's not your own, because we just don't want that.
Yeah, we just forbid it at our school. Not okay. No teachers can drive students.
I mean, as good practice too, I know some school teachers are responsible for scheduling transportation for field trips. Make sure you get this stuff. I always tell my schools, make sure you get it before kids step on the bus, because you want to know they're covered before, hopefully nothing happens. But if it does, you guys want to make sure that the contractor you're using, all their fleet is past inspection and insured.
So they should be sending you a certificate of insurance, and it'll have the dates that it's covering, so make sure as that's expiring, you request a new one. If they're good, they'll send it to you without you asking, but make sure you stay up on it.
I also, you all know each other from different schools, probably, or know different schools out there. I'd ask who you use if you're trying to do that. I would, and maybe you can even ask that to Choice Wisconsin here, recommended vendors, because we've gotten feedback that some of them are terrible. And just be careful out there, because sometimes the cheapest is what you're buying. You're buying the cheapest worst. And I understand budgets out there, but you want to make sure that they're on a safe vehicle and that you're not going to have issues with this. Risk management. Every 3 years, and usually you use your insurance company to do this, they do an analysis of how your coverage is. It's required by the DPI. You'll get a printout or multiple page document showing, are you covered properly for everything that's going on? They might have recommendations. This is something we will look at. And it looks at every piece of your overall school setting. Okay? One last part of this coverage piece, and I think it's step like 10 in this process, is the fidelity bond. This is an overall, once again, coverage. It's usually kept with the DPI. And it's once again ensuring your school has enough money to cover any problems. There is another thing, I can't think of it off the top of my head, besides the fidelity bond, there's a different, if you have I forget what, do you remember what it is? There's a
Blanket bond, you see it a lot on the certificate of insurance.
There you go. You can have that instead. But this is an added coverage you're going to need, and something you might not have had before if you weren't in this program.
And you can have the insurance that covers dishonesty and malfeasance.
Yes.
You don't have to necessarily have a fidelity bond if you've gotten the liability insurance to cover dishonesty and malfeasance. We have no. For overachievers.
Now we get into licensing. So as a licensed teacher, you know, you can go out on ELO. Ever heard of ELO? Anybody? So I'm out there, you can look me up. You're going to need to prove every single person in this group their certifications. And the guide tells you exactly what you need. This is basically an outline of it. So administrator, you need at least a bachelor's degree. teacher, you need a license or the degree. I like to get the degree. Here's why. If I get a teacher's license, licenses expire. And I never wanted to deal with that because I have to renew every 7 years, 5 years. I got a couple years left. Does anybody know?
You don't have to renew it anymore.
Am I a lifetimer?
Now it's like,
Not yet. When you renew, it'll be lifetime.
No, you might have already been
Oh,
transferred.
grandfather.
you should have been.
Never mind, I am forever. So then in fact.
No more classes.
That's a great news, because I used to have to get what, 9 credits?
6 credits.
6 credits, and I have to find that somewhere. Oh, gosh. Anyway, and if that's the case, if you get lifetime licenses, then that's as good as a degree, in my opinion. But otherwise, I always got concerned because degrees do pass. If you are getting a degree, by the way, it's supposed to be the certified real copy. It's not supposed to be some, yes, it's supposed to be official. We ran it, yes.
And what about the requirement that that degree come from an accredited institution? Because we have had schools that their teachers might have gotten a bachelor's degree, but their school was potentially maybe a very conservative school, didn't want to join that accreditation, et cetera.
Lori, I'm sorry, Carol, great job. That is something we will check. We will look at those schools. There's a site out there we can check accreditations, and it's something that is required in the guide. Nice job, Carol. Yes,
So
sir.
back to the documentation in the employee's file. The original, I mean, what are we looking for? The diploma, the original?
You don't have to, I mean, one that was sent, yeah, the original diploma.
Or a
And we keep them.
or a transcript of
Yep,
credit
transcripts
that
work.
that shows
That
that
you
the
graduated.
diploma was issued.
Yes. And I would suggest if your auditor isn't keeping these, I would have them do that. We keep them in our file. That way I don't have to continuously ask every year. So I just keep them and then I just add the new ones. That's just something we do. You guys do the same?
We don't keep the support, we just have a list.
Oh, he has a list. So he's a list he check.
So a photocopy of their original is not bad,
The auditors.
or
keep a
not
photocopy. Right.
recommended.
Not recommend, it's supposed to be an official copy. It's hard to tell though, and
Better
nowadays,
than nothing.
it's very difficult. I mean, how do I know if that's the original or a copy when you're giving me a PDF of it?
Right.
So it's,
Generally speaking, those things have like watermarks. Once you make a copy of them, it'll say like draft or it'll say copy right on it, so the paper they use for the official ones.
oh yeah, that's a good point, because doesn't it run on the back of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then I guess I would know. Anyway, so there is a little side note, and I put it down here. If, based on the fact that you're private schools, and many of you might be religious institutions, if they're teaching in what they call this area here, they're exempt. They get an exempt area. That's an exemption from it versus these other things.
Can I go back to so I know you said doing like an official transcript from their college, but then do you also want a copy of their license?
No,
At all?
you can use either or if it's a lifetimer.
One or the other.
And you don't even have to have it, I just like it because if you, in the old days, prior to your knowledge of me, if it expired, I didn't want to use an expired license. So thus I was always trying to get a degree, but if it's a lifetime license, you're done.
I'm sorry, can you go over the exception, or did you not?
Yeah, so this is for religious-based teaching. And basically if you're teaching,
Specifically rabbinical.
Yes, yes.
No other religious.
and that is if you're teaching just in that, and you don't have to have a degree or a license, they give you this special exception. I don't know where that came from. I don't know the history of that. It just is. It's a special exception. The rest of your staff, how they fall into these areas, and there's specific definitions in the guide of what you're doing that says you're an aide or a teacher or administrator. You have to have these things.
Can I add something?
Oh, yeah.
One is, for the most common pitfalls for this area are substitute teachers. They need their educational support as well. So if you have a standard list of 5 teachers you have, it's a good idea to get a file set up and have either the diploma, teacher's license, or the official transcripts. If you use a company like whatever Kelly's is called now, they're not called Kelly's anymore. You can get a letter kind of comparable to the vehicle thing from them on their letterhead saying, you know, all of our teachers are, you know, certified licensed teachers, and that would suffice for that aspect. So
That's perfect.
Ed, just clarification, one question online, what about other religious educational teachers outside of rabbinical studies? But the answer is no.
No.
It's specifically in statute, rabbinical studies only. So if you are teaching the Quran or you're teaching the Bible, you have to have
Correct.
your bachelor's degree.
It is a special exception for that one area.
And from fallback from DPI, past history is once they get this report, if you happen to have any of these people, substitutes, any teachers, they'll, when they follow up with it, they'll tell you to immediately stop having that person educate the children until you can get it, or provide it to you.
Perfect. One last thing on this, if you're wondering, and this is one thing that I know as a firm, we've been pushing, and I know other firms would probably support this. I love samples. Why? Because you only test a few. In this case, you test everybody. Okay, so there's no sampling. It's not like we're going to miss them. We're going to check them all. Okay. All right, now, if you are following along, please stop following. Okay, stop following along on your sheets. Please don't look at them. We are getting into something that's new, brand new. All right. This is something that in the SNSP they've been dealing with for a while. They've had background checks. This is new to the choice other world. Okay, and new for the fiscal guide. The reason I tell you not to look at your sheet anymore is because we're going to get into some questioning and you'll have all the answers. Okay, so please don't follow along. Now, first off, every single person in your school that falls into these categories, and these categories are very oblivious, not exact, I would say. They're very open-ended. Every single person, every 5 years needs a background check. You need to keep it on file, you need to keep it on location, because we're going to have to view it. You can't just tell me you did them all. Where it gets interesting is some of the language here. I've tried to be careful here because it is, like I say, very difficult to word it properly. If they're paid through your payroll and working on site, they need a background check. I don't care what they are. If they're on site in your payroll, background check them. If they are off-site, let's say you have a accounting building, or I don't know, something else. If they're off-site, working in any way to support the school and the educational programming and anything in that area, they need a background check, even if they're not in your payroll. Even more difficult. Key thing here, an employee. That definition is very difficult to get your arms around. I myself, who've spent some time with DPI in this multiple times, just last week, and read a lot about this, am not totally positive I could tell every single person who is an employee or not. We're going to get into that in a second. Okay? I have attached right down here a bulletin that they've given us. I think it's right here. It's out on their drive. There is the link. This bulletin will help you a little bit, but it won't solve all your answers. Because it doesn't solve all mine, and I've read it 3 or 4 times. Does it solve all yours, Jason?
Absolutely not.
So, key thing, and we're going to continue on this for a bunch of slides here, so be ready. Who doesn't need to be tested? And remember, I'm going to use some words here, and I'm going to come back to them again and fight back on what I just said. So it's going to kind of sound like I'm here and then I'm back there. If you are a true independent contractor, and a true vendor, you are not required to be tested. Notice true, and notice defined by a certain thing you'll see in a second. An off-site employee who does not work in school-related areas at all, or anything to support the school, you do not have to be tested. You can be on the payroll, be working off-site, as long as you're not involved in school functions, you don't have to test them.
But just remember that administration or bookkeeping counts as school function.
Completely agree, Carol, nice job. Even if you're like, and it's just, so they're like, you could be dealing with grants on a different site. That would be considered school-related, in my opinion. And you have to get tested if you're off-site. If you're on-site, you're tested no matter what. So they have a two-part test they talk about all the time, and if you call DPI, they're going to reference it to you every single time because they've probably told me this about 15 times, maybe more, and probably 15 times in at least the phone call I had with them for a half hour last week. Okay, they're not, at least for me, maybe for you, and you never know, maybe for you, they will not tell me if I describe everything about Jason here, they will not tell me if he passes or not and needs a test. They're going to say, use your test. I will not tell you specifically, Jason, if he's good or not. You can come up with your own assumptions of why they won't tell me that, even though I give them every circumstance around Jason's career. So the test is, and you can, I have a website for this too. Individual must be free of the employer's direct control. This is an independent contractor or vendor. That's what we're talking about. So you can't control them and you can't direct them. They have to be working for you in their own world as a vendor for you. Secondly, they have to be doing the services that they're doing for you for other people, because that makes them like a vendor. If I hire Jason as my cook, okay, and he's cooking for other places, that makes him look more like a vendor than if he's only cooking for me, even if he's got his own cooking business and it's all supporting me. Carol, if I say anything wrong, or Jason, please fire away, because I'm trying to be as clear as I can. This is the link right here to the DWD site going over some of these rules. And please read it. Please look into it. Because it's going to talk about what I'm talking about here, but maybe you'll get something I missed. Now, here's the fun part. We've all talked about the rules that I can give you right now. It's time for a test. All right? You're school people. You like tests. Green is yes, we need to check them. Red is don't check them. Okay, so don't look at your pages. I have a pastor here. He works in chapel services. The school is located on the site with your church. So they're both on site. He's doing chapel services, not education related. Test them or no?
Yes.
Yes, he's on site. Number 2, finance person, not on site, paid for working on school grants and finances.
Yes.
Good, 2 for 2. How about this one? Lawn services are done on site by the landlord who only owns your property and is paid through your rent.
Yes, because he's on site.
But he does it for other.
Wait, what?
So he's doing lawn services for you. You're paying for that. He's not doing any educational. He's doing it on site. How many people, raise your hand, I can't see the people at home, think he should be tested?
I think he should be tested.
How many people think, no way, don't test him, it's a waste of time? $7, I've heard, that's how much it costs, I don't know. I would say yes. Why?
Because he owns the property, he's on site, and the rent that you're paying him to rent the building is in your school expenses.
So I would say no on all those factors.
Really?
The reason I would say yes is, how many people does he do this lawn mowing for? Just you.
Wow.
That is the reason I would say you should test it. Now remember, This is my best guess of this law. I am not the one who wrote it. I read the statute, which is very simple, and they've made this very complex. So be careful, but I would say you should test it. And it's not because he's kind of a vendor. But because he's not doing any vendor activity like that for anybody else, that's where he falls into the danger zone.
But
Yes.
technically it's his property, and whether he's cutting the grass or not, you're still paying him rent for the building.
Correct.
Which is a school expense.
Which is, it doesn't matter if it's a school expense. Remember, if you're doing something as a vendor, working for the school, like driving the buses for your school, as a vendor doing that for many schools, they don't have to test them. Because if, let's say I own a bus company and I service all your schools, and I just send my people out, are you controlling those people? Are you making any kind of, are they doing it for someone else just like you? That falls into the vendor category, and thus, although it's an expense for the school, you don't have to check them, because they're a true vendor.
I have another vendor example in it, like a lunch provider that we outsourced, but they own this
You
cook.
know, I think that's a great point. Hold 1 second. It's coming. How about a team? Let's say, I don't know how many of you possibly hire students during the summer to come in and clean desks and straighten up things or mop the floors or whatever.
Yes, because you're.
Okay, a team, how many people say check them?
Yes.
Yes. You know what's interesting? So I read about this a little bit. You're probably not going to find out anything, but you still should check them. Why? Because they're sealed. But it doesn't matter because the rule says you should. And according to even the DPI here, it's actually one of their examples. They're saying yes, even though you'll never find out anything about them. Yep, $7. Next up, a cooking group. So cooks who are paid by the cooking company, separate company, but provide your lunches at the school directly to the kids. And by the way, they cook for many people.
Yes.
Test them?
Yes,
Why do you say yes?
because they're in direct contact with the kids.
Does not qualify, doesn't
They're a
matter.
vendor.
He's a true vendor. That's a true vendor scenario, in my opinion, because they're doing what? You don't control them, and they do the same service for everybody. Other people, yes.
But if I was running the school, I would check them because it makes sense from a safety standpoint.
Right,
So
and
there's
they do.
two things here.
Yeah.
There's the technical, what does the auditor have to check for choice? And then there's the common sense, you're running a school.
But the problem with that is what happens if Jane is sick one day and all of a
Then
sudden
someone
Jody
else
shows
comes
up?
up, yeah.
On those, we're gonna consider them a vendor, because what are they doing? They're cooking for many people. You do not control them. They are a vendor according to the rules.
But if they're a specific person just working in your building serving lunch,
Yes.
that is
I
a.
would check.
Yes, you should check them because what? They're not doing it for other people.
Other people. Now here's my question.
But what if
We
they
have a
work for the,
maintenance man
Employee.
who is technically employed by an outside company, and they do provide services to other places, however, they are constantly in our building all the
Once
time.
again, I would call him a vendor
Okay.
because he's working for another company that you don't control, and he does, then that service is being used. I would, like Carol
Kind of
says,
just out of.
check him because he's around the kids.
They would be some of the first people
People
I
they
would
would
want to check.
But according to the rule, not required to be checked, we would not check them.
Okay.
And so theoretically, you could save yourself $7 every 5 years. So, yes, Carol.
And we have a question online. How about a before-school professional development presenter that comes in before school hours, giving seminars like this to your teachers?
Are we paying them?
Let's assume that we are paying them
If you're paying
as
them,
a, not as an employee, but you're hiring them in. and I
okay, so there's a couple questions on this is when we get into kind of crazy. If they're for a company that does this for all schools, you would fall into the vendor category, and even if you paid them, you would not have to check them. If this is a lone wolf, and this is what I do just for your school, and I'm a retired teacher and I come in and present on this one topic, and you pay me, you need to get checked because you are no longer a vendor, and you are no longer anything but someone working on premises and someone who only does it here. Chad, did you have a question?
I just wanted to circle back to the team paid for to clean rooms during the summer. You need to get parental permission to do a background check.
Very good point. Because they are underage, yes, you would need it to approve from the parent. But you are required to check them. Okay. I got another one for you. A night custodian at the school on your payroll.
Yes.
Definitely, right? You control them. They work right on campus. Definite. Okay. How about the second one? What about a night custodian at the off-site office on your payroll?
Yeah. You're paying for it.
No. Why? Are they involved in educational programming? Because remember, if you're off-site, you can exclude you if you're not involved in any educational pieces.
How's that different than the accountant that's offsite?
Because if they're working on the books for the school, they're providing support. This is just cleaning the floors.
The accountant and the
On the offsite.
administration
Right.
is specified in the department's rule.
Isn't that fascinating? It's a very, and by the way, once again, you might get farther than me, but when I give an exact example of, like I said, if I went and said, Jason does this, that, da, 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 should be checked? They won't. They wouldn't even go, I gave them my slides and they would not go through them individually. I actually sent them to them and said, do you agree with these?
Okay.
And they said, use the test.
But where do you get into, where do you end up having a problem? If they don't tell you up front that you have to test him and you don't, then so what?
Okay, so here's why I get nervous. And this is an honest to God scenario that I've actually questioned. And I've questioned to Carol, who questioned them. So we are the gatekeepers. Okay, we have the keys to say, you're good. What if because I don't know if Joe should get checked right here. What if I say he doesn't have to? And what if Joe commits something terrible?
Right, and they're coming.
Is my firm in trouble here? And that's where it gets kind of questionable. There's an exact rule there, okay? The other question too, and it was brought up actually by the guy sitting in the back who is my boss. He brought up a good point. How do I even, you can give me all the people you check and I can look at your payroll, but I don't know your vendor relationships. How do I know that I even have everybody? How is it possible to know? I don't know that answer, and they couldn't give us that answer.
Carol, did you find that question out when I asked you that, the scope of what we have to do?
They have not given me a direct answer. I've had the same kind of responses that Ed has gotten thus far. It's a little bit of a work in progress, and I sense from the department that they're very hesitant to come down with clarity on this. That's why if it was me and I was in your shoes, if you ever have a question, better to overcheck rather than undercheck. That would be my approach. They did say, and it is in the bulletin, that if you have a vendor, a cooking company, for instance, that's providing meals for all the people, if it's through MPS or one of your districts, you definitely don't have to worry about that because they would already be doing those checks. Same way with a bus company. In order to have a bus license, you have to have a background check, so you do not have to get it from bus companies. But if you have other vendors, they suggest if you want to be for certain, you can get a copy of the background check that was run by the vendor organization themselves so that you don't have to personally run one. That's another option if you want to just kind of cover your bases more. But it's very murky, and I apologize. I'm sorry that it's not more clear. We've been pressing on this, and potentially in the future, maybe they will come down with greater clarity. But right now, these are very murky questions.
And the big thing that you got to be careful on, and the DPI will come right back on me if I said anything different, is it doesn't have to be on your payroll. If you're paying them through like just one check here, you get this, they should probably be tested. Okay, it is not based on your payroll. It could be any way you're paying them. So if you're using athletic accounts, it gets questionable whether you should have to test them. I posed in the DPI meeting with them, with all the other auditors, what about referees? And according to what we've read about the WIAA,
WIAA.
thank you. They already say they background check to be a ref, but then do I have to prove that? And they didn't really want to say it. They actually at one point came back to me and said, Ed, who would you check? You remember that? They love me. So anyway, so that I don't know. Moving on. How about volunteers?
Yes.
According to the rules,
It says
no.
but we do.
Okay, but
But
that's crazy.
if you are in the Archdiocese
Yes,
of Milwaukee
you
or
have
any
to.
other archdiocese,
It's a great idea.
that
have
is
to.
all-encompassing, yes.
Yes.
And I completely agree with you.
There you go.
And I would check my volunteers because who knows where they're coming from? But according to the DPI and according to what we will do to you, we do not care about them.
And when you say background checks, you're talking about the formal $7 one every
Yes.
time.
Yep.
Not,
I'm talking about the real one that says exactly what you've done in your life.
Where is that one from?
I've never actually written that. Go
I
ahead.
can send it to you.
Okay,
It's,
thank you.
there's a state level one, which is $7 or $7.50 per person, something like that. Some folks take the next level and do a federal one, which is, I believe, $12 or it's a little bit more expensive, something like that. But either one for this purpose is sufficient.
And like I said, I would put it right in their personnel file and keep it with them until the 5 years up and you gotta do them again. Thankfully, next year when your auditor will come, anyone they checked and still works there, they'd be covered because we already run through them. And your auditor should be tracking who they checked. So they wouldn't have to look at those. So the first year, this year is gonna be a beast because everybody. And they've even talked maybe, they don't say for sure, but maybe depending on the first year, they might get into sampling at some point, who knows? But that's a big maybe.
So I think too, another thing to address is that right now, you probably, there's a chance you have a handful of employees or people that would be qualified as under this employee test that Ed's been explaining, that you don't have a background check for. So I would immediately go and perform that, get it in the file now. Ideally, you're gonna do that at the time that you're hiring someone and get that first. That's what's moving forward. But if you come to the point of your audit this fall and you don't have that, the department has said immediately, the auditor will tell you, run it now, right now. And if they pass, okay, fine. They'll give you a little bit of that grace to get it in the file this first time around. But moving forward, it should always be something that you do at the time of hire. Now, if you have someone that fails the test, then you're gonna need to get rid of that employee or whatever, and Ed will walk you through that.
This is my little, just to cover my tail. Remember, what I'm giving you as examples, I'm not positive. Okay, this is to the best of my wisdom of reading the law, talking to the DPI, and this is also, I mean, in direct communication with many people. I honestly can't tell you perfectly in every one of these scenarios if I'm right. I think I am. Go ahead.
And we have an online question. If a volunteer is given a stipend, do they then fall into the category of needing a background check? I would tend to think yes, because then you are paying them.
I would agree that as soon as you walk into the land of giving them money, you are exposing yourself to possible risk. So I would background check them. Like I say, if you're in a question about it, if you're debating, just background check them. Okay, that would be my safety way of saying, worst case scenario, just check them. Now, what are we checking for? That might be the last piece that you want to know about this. You're checking for what they consider commonly accepted moral and ethical standards. Because you might be like, I background checked them, and I don't know. It's kind of bad, but not that bad. There isn't an exact science here either. It's not like an all-encompassing list. You've done this, you're out. You've done that, you're okay. You've done this, you're out. But it's basically this thing. And it could the individual endanger any of these for your students? If they do, you should, and you have them already on your payroll, you should eliminate them right away, and I'm sorry. There isn't anything to make amends. This isn't, he's been great for 20 years. If they're on there, they hit this category, they should be eliminated. And in particular, one of them, they specifically call out in the rule. If the individual on with your equipment, the school's equipment, does any of those with pornographic materials, they're gone. No debate, gone. I don't care if they did it at home on your computer, they're gone. And if we see anything like that, or if anything found like that, when we come in, we're going to tell you, you have to remove that individual. And he might cry. Sorry. All right. So that's pretty much the whole guide that I have for you. We're not done though. I know, it's like, oh God, it's been so long. There's a couple key things I'm going to have you have a quick run through here. This is pretty much my end. These are some of the things I strongly suggest you start keeping. Every single one of these we've talked about, you want to keep this documentation, have it ready, so when the auditor hits you with that provided by client list, it's game time. Documentation, keeping your support, keeping organized is huge for this program because of all the requirements. And I know it's a lot, and I get that. There's nothing we can do about it. Secondly, if your auditor, they send you this PBC list, provided by client list, and you get all this populations you need, and you send it to them. If they don't have these samples before they get there, I'd be on the phone with them. I'd be calling up Ed Ritter and saying, Ed, why don't I have my samples? Because you're busy people. And the last thing you want to do is be dealing with all the questions and all this and pulling materials to support the samples. Carla, how would you like that? We show up one day and you don't have any samples, good luck.
Well, you know, our auditors, they pull their own, they pull the applications themselves, going back to that piece of it.
What about the accounting piece, the fiscal part?
No, you guys pull it.
Yes. Would you like that, Lauren, if I showed up with nothing pulled, no samples?
You would have to wait.
Wait in line.
And it would make me very unhappy.
So press your auditors so that you know what you got to get from them. This is a key point I wanted to make. It's scary to be audited, scared to be checked. I get that. Nobody wants anyone sitting there saying you're doing it wrong. But we are not out to get you. We are not evil people trying to get you. Use us as a resource throughout the year. Anytime you have questions. If your auditor is not providing you that service, find a new auditor. Because that's what you're paying them for. You're paying them to be your backup support system. While we do kind of inherently work for the DPI because we're checking you, we are not out there being like, I ain't gonna tell Jason this so that I can fry him at the end of the year. That is not our goal. We want to give you as much information so you are right. I didn't get into the position of being a nonprofit auditor wreck schools. Okay? And neither should any of your auditors. That's what we should be. See, friendly. Last thing up. I get it, everyone's busy. If you went to my desk right now, it sure doesn't look like this, right? Because the school starts up and it's a couple weeks in and all of a sudden we have the count date. And then, oh, all these activities are going on and oh, now we have sports and I've got all these bills and all this stuff going on. And boy, I meant to be like this, but I'm really this. Try not to let this happen. Get ahead of the game. Get all that stuff done as soon as you can. Like those background checks. Do them now. I mean, wouldn't it be terrible to be like, oh man, they're coming next week, I gotta run them all. Okay? As soon as that PBC list comes out, get it back to the client, get it back to the owner right away. So he has no excuse, or she. Because if we get like this, it's unhappy, it's awful, and then auditing might be this. Okay? That is the end of my slide deck. I have left you some links here. My contact information is here. I imagine Jason will give you any information to get a hold of him or Chad in the back. We are here to help. We are not trying to sell you. We are trying to guide you. Use us, okay? And in addition, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. And once again, thank you so much for Carol and Ashley and all School Choice and Lisa, who you don't even see here, for putting this all together. Does anybody have any final questions? Because I would love to hit them. Oh, we do. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, this is, you still have a few minutes here before 12 o'clock, so feel free to shoot out your questions either online or in person.
I believe also you're gonna get a survey asking you what you liked, didn't like. Please fill that out. It only helps. It gives us an idea of what you did like or didn't like, or what you would like to see next time. We would like to make School Choice Wisconsin a place where you have a resource. Okay, and that's why I sit on this board. Not a board, I guess committee. All right.
And two, if you, I know we kind of cut the Q&A short from the enrollment audit piece earlier, so if you have residual questions you want to throw out there now, that's appropriate also.
Okay. If nobody has any questions, Jason, do you have anything you would like to add?
Just be careful with the background checks now, like sometimes the athletic fund has their own checkbook and, or the athletic director might be in charge of hiring these referees. Or the one that I just thought of the other day that, you guys might not think of is like your scorekeeper. If you pay that person, chances are that person might be a kid in your school that probably only does it for your school. Be very cognizant of that because sometimes those people get paid in cash through like a petty cash disbursement from the athletic director. So there really is no paper trail for us to find necessarily, but just be cognizant of that.
Laura, do you have anything to add? Okay, Carol, do you have anything to add back there?
No, just that we're definitely, School Choice Wisconsin is always here to be a resource to you. We are happy to try to answer your questions. If not, we will seek out the answers for you. So you can call us at any point in time or shoot us an email at scw@parentchoice.org.
Go ahead, sir.
One thing I'd suggest to the group, which is what we're developing at St. Andrews in Melbourne, is a lot of different functions are handled by many or few people, depending on the school offices and staffing. But we have decided to have a compliance officer, if you would, in title, so that one person is aware of many of these regulations and things to be looking for, to be able to internally check to make sure that things are being done that are appropriate to the file, the document, like your background checks and the hiring process, and is everything in order? Teacher accreditation, but everybody doesn't know all those things. So, and you can't rely only on the principal because that person is way too busy trying to keep everything in order. And so someone should be, part of their job description would be, quote, compliance.
And I completely agree.
Suggestion.
I completely agree.
Especially
it's very difficult.
Religious environments, yes, parish environments. Everybody's ministerial, everybody's pastoral, and everybody loves everybody, but you need to have a black hat.
I completely agree. In addition, the fact is, throwing it all in the bookkeeper is very tough too.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be, right, the person is writing checks and trying to balance checks.
So, yeah, it needs to be kind of a collective effort. And like I said, I do like having one person in charge. That might be a great idea if you can do that.
And teach.
I agree. But yeah, like I say, thank you so much for coming. I like the live audience. It's so much better than the people on, because I can't see them. So I hope they're doing good. But thank you again for coming. I have nothing else for you. If you do come home, if you're driving home and you're like, I wish I would have asked this question, please email it. We will get back to you. I promise. Okay? Thank you so much.
Right.